What up, y'all? Back again. I wanted to go over trauma today so that we can understand trauma, understand what we're going through, what we've been through. Also, this deals with trauma that the narcissist has dealt with and gone through because we both grew up in the same family. I wanted to go over trauma because I want us to all also have a channel here for healing, awareness of it. So healing, let's get started. So healing comes with the understanding of self-awareness. And until you're self-aware, you can't get healing. And so this is at least where we are. We have gotten to the point where we're self-aware. Trauma is defined as a wound, and how we live our lives is dealing with coping from early childhood wounds that we have incurred have the largest effect on our life. A child can't fix a wound. So what happens, and we're talking about in a toddler child, and this is either the narcissist or in us. So just follow me here. A child, as a toddler cannot fix the wound, so they keep getting wounded. And where the wound is meant to heal, times when it comes in childhood, that they don't heal. And so, they have to adapt. Something is happening outside the body and it causes a split inside. These are events, okay? And the event is not the trauma. It will cause it to be traumatic, but it's not the trauma. The trauma is the injury that lasts inside, where you're traumatized by it. You didn't have the tools from the family hierarchy to deal with this. You didn't have the caregivers to deal with it. So you didn't have the tools and you didn't have the support from the caregiver. So what it does is through the event, it turns you into fight or flight, freeze or fawn, because you're in survival mode. And so you have two types of trauma. They're defined as like a big T trauma. This is how defining it is an event. Like it could be a car accident. It could be a bad sexual thing that happens. It could be like a hurricane. It could be anything big, physical abuse and stuff like that. But then there's also, this is what I want to focus on more. The little T trauma is more relationship based. Relationship with your parents, relationship with the caregiver, relationship with your siblings, relationships, okay? When you get older, it would be bosses, coworkers, family, friends, it would be, and your love partner relationship, which we're mostly talking about, but not always. Not always. These are psyche type injuries that affects the body and the mind, and it keeps you stuck. And it'll be stuck in there. It'll be stuck in your nervous system long past when the trauma occurs. And then you could have triggers happen later because you don't know what happened sometimes. Sometimes you don't know, sometimes you do know, but it hasn't been dealt with. So you have triggers that pop up later. And then you're wondering why you might be acting out. It's because you have unhealed trauma in your life. And so there's two different types of wounds. There's a raw wound, which would be like extreme sensitive wound, an open cut, right? You just touch it, ow. And so this is like what I would call the narcissist when you would say something to them really small and they rage. It's very offensive to them, but it's really, you're like, that's not a big deal. I didn't really say anything. So they have unhealed, extremely sensitive wounds. And then there's the other type of wound, which is the scar tissue type wound, where it's tough, it's insensitive, it's non-flexible, but they're both restricting you. They're both restricting you in life and in your relationships. So that's my point, because they keep you stuck and it makes you less human. And there's 60 characteristics and that, that deal with your personality and in relationships. And they all that are affected by the trauma will bring you in and take you in a negative direction if they're unhealed. And so trauma affects the brain and brain development in a negative way, of emotions in a negative way, mental health in a negative way, the ability to cope in a negative way, and relationships in a negative way. There's a spectrum from mild to severe, just like anything else. And so we're going to go over hormones real quick. What happens is you have different types of hormones. You have the danger hormone, cortisol and adrenaline, which causes the fight or the flight, which gets you ready to get into a fight. For instance, that's what it gears the body up to protect itself and to run. Then there's the oxytocin, the love chemical. So then in the small toddler, for instance, when they have some needs, they need help, the brain stimulates them with oxytocin, which causes them, say they're crying because they're hungry or they need to be hugged. So they will run to the mother or the father. The mother or father will hear them crying, and they will get oxytocin, and they will run to the child. And then it sends the child to somebody with strength that can help them solve their need. Okay, that's what it naturally would do. So, but there's a problem when, say, the mother or the father or the caregiver, they are beating the kids. So then what happens is cortisol is released in the child, but they get ready for fight or flight, but they can't do anything because they're toddlers or they're too small, right? So then it sends out the cortisol to help them, the oxytocin to help them get help that way, the love need. But that's not working either. So then in this situation, the brain will turn off the cortisol, the fight or flight, and the oxytocin, the love hormone, to get the help that way. And so then it turns to a third chemical, opioids. And this is also a hormone that's in your body. And so it sends opioids out to the body and to get ready because pain is coming. Okay, and so this is how your body naturally works, and it works in a toddler this way. And so this is how we come up with some of our issues, and the narcissist has their issues because we grew up in the same families and they weren't necessarily healthy. And so we didn't go down the same path as them, but we do deal with some things that we need to address and take care of and to accept. And so in this situation now, you have the cortisol, which would send, say, blood or sugar to the extremities of the body. So the sugar would feed the muscles, and the blood being shot to the extremities is full of oxygenated blood, so it will give it strength to run and to fight and to prepare to run and fight. But then when, for instance, if opiates are sent out, it sends the blood to come into the core of the body and away from the extremities, because this is where all your organs are, and this is where you need the most safety. And it will send out the opioid release, so it will deaden everything, because you're about to get, say, cut, say, from a knife or something, and get damaged. So that's what it does naturally. So so the child can't use fight or flight, and then so they can't use the oxytocin, but the opiates is sent out. And so this is why when these children get older, whether it be the empath or the narcissist, if they're used to this happening a lot, they could also be highly addicted to opiates, the pills, the medications, because they could be highly addicted to them, because this was a similar type feeling that they had as a child. And now if they were to try it later on, they may realize that it deadens the pain in the same way, or maybe even better, I don't know. But then also what comes with this is cutting, is why you see people that are cutters, because they cut themselves and it causes opiate release, and it causes a relief of the emotional pain that they're dealing with. And so they get a sense of pain-free type place from either taking the medication or from cutting later in life. And so you have two different types of trauma. There's big T trauma, which could be physical abuse, spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, any kind of real heavy abuse. And then you could have like the car accident, the hurricane, you go through any of that big T trauma. But what we're talking about is more of the little T trauma, which is not that bad things happen, but good things didn't happen. Okay, so things that were like you didn't, your caregivers were emotionally checked out. There was no acceptance when you needed acceptance, no respect when you needed respect. There was neglect when you needed and validation. And so both affect the brain the same way. 80% of little T trauma is in sensitive type, more sensitive type toddlers and children. And so where I think this is where you get the narcissist more than the empath. And then they say that, the 80%er, and then the sensitive child is what gets the real brunt of it. But then there could be the other sibling who's not as sensitive as the sensitive child, and it may not affect them not nearly as much. And so Most people are good as far as caregivers. They're good at supplying the physical needs, the intellectual needs, but not the emotional needs. And that's where the trauma occurs. The failure to meet these needs and an ongoing inability to resolve these issues because it causes problems that are hurtful. And follow me now. And so if you're on still, give me a like and a thumbs up, please, and a subscription. Love y'all. And so I need to try to resolve these issues, but nobody's meeting these needs. So then they ask for help. They continually ask for help. They get criticized, punished. They tell them you're weak, quit being a baby. And so they're trying to adapt. And then this is where the mask comes on for the narcissist. You see, this is where it happens. And then for us, we become the people pleaser. The perfectionist is what the narcissist would probably go for. We'd be more the people pleaser. And so maybe even a perfectionist, but still nobody meets their needs. And now they don't feel safe either. So now there's emotional needs. They're not getting met. They're now feeling scared. They're feeling unhappy. There's pain. This is deep in their subconscious. And now they have pain, and that's not getting resolved. And now they have pain on top of pain. And now it must be me. Maybe it's me. Now we're going inside. Now we're causing it. It's our fault. Now we're thinking. So now it's like we have identity issues. Now it starts to change and cause a negative self-identity because the needs were not met. The child keeps changing and switching gears, and it's not working. So then it's me against the big bad world. That's what the narcissist would say, right? And so because it's them, it's me against the big bad world. Because even the empath can go through this as well, but not to the point. And because nobody's there helping to hear them, to take care of them, to deal with them in the right manner that's healthy. And now their main emotion is fear, and fear is not good. Fear leads to a lot of other things. And, it's like where God says, fear not, for I'm with you. There's something to be said about that. But instead of fear, it should be more joy. But there's fear, and that's the main emotion. It takes over from joy. Now it's fear. And they don't want to get hurt, and they can't relax. They're afraid they're going to get hurt. They're walking on eggshells. They're on guard all the time because something bad might happen. There's vigilance because they're in survival mode, you see? And it's an ongoing problem. And the issue leads to more and more coping mechanisms, but these coping mechanisms aren't good coping mechanisms. It occurs when the child's not being seen, not being loved, and not being connected to anybody. And so there's two types there's simple and complex type trauma. And simple trauma is a one-time type issue, but we're dealing with the complex trauma, which is more than one trauma. It could be trauma every day. And we're talking about now pathological type caregiver that is giving you these traumas on a daily basis. And so, and most of it is little t trauma. It could be mixed with big T trauma, but let's just focus on the little t trauma. So, they may grow older and the narcissist or the empath and say, well, I don't really have that much trauma. I didn't deal with trauma, but you did. You did, but because it's kind of insidious how slow it works, that you don't realize it sometimes, or you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know why you act in the way you act, or you may be acting maladaptive, but think it's adaptive. We're rationalizing it out until you get to the acceptance of you start dealing with all the stuff we've been dealing with. So anyway, the little t trauma, and if you have problems with the little t trauma at this point, there's 60 type of characteristics of trauma and how you deal with it in a healthy way. And for instance, PTSD only has 10. Okay, but in the little t trauma, there's 60 type characteristics, and they say 40 of these could be affected if you're dealing with little t trauma to a certain degree. So you're talking about you could have some maladaptive ways, but more this would be more focused. We're talking about more in the narcissist to some degree. The trauma is loss of connection to ourselves, to our families, to the world around us, and how to recognize the trauma. It happens slowly. So, like I said, you can feel like you didn't have that much, but you could have, and we adapt subtly to the changes without even knowing it. And so then when you wake up, you can you can find out, depending on who you are, that your life is in shambles, the way you've been dealing with it. The biggest cause of trauma is little t trauma, and it's because of neglect from the caregiver, the hierarchy. Please give me a like, a thumbs up, and a subscription. It's because they are only thinking about themselves, the caregiver, and it is abuse. And so I hope that helps somebody out there today. Give me a like, a thumbs up, and a subscription. I love y'all, and stand tall until next time. Peace out.